Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for finding the time today to jump on this Dematic Vocollect webinar. For those who are online that may not know me, my name is Seth Van Dyke. I'm the sales manager for Dematic's Real Time Logistics group here in Australia. Before I begin, I would also like to just introduce Jay Blinderman, who is the Director of Product Marketing for Vocollect, and who will be taking over the majority of the webinar and the content that we would like to go through with you today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. As you will see on your screens, there is an area towards the right-hand side in which you can enter any questions that you may have as we progress through the different slides and the webinar. Jay and I will attempt to answer as many questions as we can on the webinar today within the time frame that we have allocated. And for any questions that we may be unable to answer, please know that we have noted those down, and your relevant account manager will be in contact with you to go through those. As you may already know, the webinar will also be recorded, and we will ensure that this is distributed accordingly. Okay, so just to begin with, before we move into, I guess, the main content of today's presentation, I really wanted to just touch on, I guess, Dematic's partnership with Vocollect. And as many of you probably are aware, Dematic has been implementing a platinum partner of Vocollect for quite some time, for in fact over 15 years, both locally and globally. In saying this, Dematic is really on the top of the tree when it comes to Vocollect partners, and we're at the platinum level. We've been working with Vocollect not only within Asia Pacific, but also very heavily both within the Americas and Europe as well. Something that's really important and I think is extremely relevant as we progress through the webinar is Dematic is an integrator of Vocollect's voice solution. Really, we work to ensure that we understand our customers' different processes, in particular their pain points, and what we try and do is we try and ensure with the Vocollect product that we address some of those issues and some of those processes on the floor, and that we develop and integrate the best voice solution for our customers. And I think really with the latest and greatest innovative technology that is now out in the market from Vocollect, it allows us to really not only address traditionally what has been efficiencies and accuracy concerns within the pick face, but also for us to analyze and also look at voice to help increase those efficiencies throughout the DC within other processes as well. Some of the things that Jay will elaborate on a little bit more within the webinar is, but what I would like to touch on is some of the new things that Dematic, with the support of Vocollect, has brought out to the marketplace. So some of you may already know that recently we released a voice rental program. We understand, and we've been listening to our customers to know that quite often within particularly the busy periods throughout the year, there's a need to have more equipment. This equipment, however, is not always needed in the quieter times, and what we've worked towards is the ability to formulate a formal rental program for our customers, allowing our customers to expand on their existing Vocollect fleet over a temporary period of time. Something I think that is really innovative that Vocollect have also released into the marketplace is Vocollect Academy. It's a web-based training program that really allows not only the operators of the voice equipment, but also supervisors and IT staff to understand how best to implement and use their voice solution. And off the back of that, obviously training is imperative as well, on-the-floor training. And with Vocollect's RapidStart, it really frees traditionally what has been a supervisor's role to go out with the operator and familiarize them with this technology. Now there's the capability for the operator to self-train themselves and become competent with voice in a very short period of time. Okay, in saying that, I may hand you over to Jay now to begin with the formal proceedings of the webinar. Thank you, Jay.
Yep, thanks very much, Seth. And once again, my name is Jay Blinderman, and I probably had the pleasure of meeting some of you in past years, as when I started my career with Vocollect, I had the opportunity to travel to the Australia and New Zealand markets and make some personal calls with Dematic and the team. So once again, thanks for joining today. What I'm going to do is take you through the Talkman A700 Solution and hopefully provide you with some information that will intrigue you enough to move forward with possibly upgrading to some new gear and some new software. So one of the things to think about is something that Seth mentioned, where Dematic has expertise, and that's certainly about helping you do what you need to do to run the most efficient operation possible. And I imagine that when most people on this call purchased voice, whether it was 5 or even 10 years ago, your operation today looks significantly different than it did when you originally sold the solution. So you might have had a single thread or a single channel type of distribution system where you were doing pick to case. You might have been doing some mixed pallets, or you might have been doing piece pick to a tote on a cart. But 10 years ago, there was no e-commerce to speak of. 10 years ago, there probably wasn't much, if any, in-store fulfillment of customer orders, and that's what people are coming to expect today. So we had those types of things in mind when we developed the A700 solution. So with that said, I want to talk about what we launched, and this launch started back in Q4 of 2013. So we initially launched a couple of devices, the one you see at the top of the screen, which is the Talkman A730, which is the first wearable purpose-built device with an integrated scanner. And then we also launched at the same time the A710, which is in the left-hand corner, which is a Bluetooth-only device, very sleek, very ergonomic, and very light. Both those devices were Bluetooth and could hook up with the SRX2 headset or Bluetooth wireless peripherals. So the whole goal of this solution set was to make work easier and simpler, both for your workers as well as for your operation, to integrate scanning and voice, as I mentioned with the A730, to minimize supply chain risk, and I'll talk in a moment about how it does that, and then finally this solution with the software that's involved enables you to personalize your voice. So if in fact there was a need for a customized application, you could not only build that application, but you could also apply your own voice as the text-to-speech type of solution. So that's what we launched in Q4 2013. So moving on to some more recent announcements you might have seen with the A700 solution. The first and probably the cornerstone of the whole solution is Voice Catalyst 2.1. So this software, which would be in effect a replacement of the voice client that you're probably running today, adds the ability to run a legacy task without costly rewrites. And I'll talk about that a little more in detail in a few minutes. Gives you access to some of the latest and greatest features, both in the software and the hardware, and provides a faster text-to-speech engine speed. The other newest element that we launched was the Talkman A720. And as you can see, this particular device is similar to the A710 that I mentioned before, with the exception of it has 2 Talkman connectors, which everyone on the call knows are known as TICO connectors. So the benefit of that is that this device, with all the other bells and whistles we've built into the A700 solution, enables you to use any wired peripherals that you may already have ownership in and want to continue to use. So not only SR series headsets, but if you wanted to, you could also use any long-range scanners for new workflows like put-away or replenishment with this particular device. So as I mentioned before, and this is what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes, is providing the simplest path to upgrade your DC, followed by some specific use cases around the Talkman A720 with the 2 TICO connectors. So with that, let's go into a little more detail about how it provides the simplest upgrade path for your DC, in your case for your shed. So as I mentioned a moment ago, probably everyone on this call, unless you're a newer Vocollect customer to the last year or two, uses voice client in some form. So for all of you on the phone call that use voice client today, what you need to understand, and what hopefully you'll understand after this call is over, is that no matter what host system you have, no matter what WMS or ERP, no matter what workflows you're using today, whether it be picking or additional workflows, you now have a new set of tools with Voice Catalyst 2.1 to improve your operations. So voice client customers will experience the benefit of Voice Catalyst 2.1 without having to make any changes to either your workflow or any changes to your host system. So you would use exactly what you have today, but you're going to pick up significant new benefits, and I'm going to go into detail on this webinar today. So before Voice Catalyst, this was your world. You were running some form of voice client. I guess it's possible there might be some people on the call that are even running a version before 3.4. But you're running one of these versions. Or, as I mentioned, if you're a newer Vocollect customer or might have converted your task already to an application, you're running some form of Voice Catalyst 2.1. Unfortunately, the way we had these things set up is that there was a wall between the two, and there was no possible way for them to meet, and there wasn't a very good way for them to coexist. So to move from a task to a voice application actually required some pretty significant effort. It also, in addition to the significant effort, required some significant cost associated with making that effort. And then there was also some risk involved, because if you had to change your software to convert from a task to a voice app, there are some potential things that might have been missed or some things that might have been overlooked. So you might have gone from a very stable platform to one that had some risk included in it, which obviously wouldn't be the outcome anybody would be looking for. So what if we could provide lots of reward to you without a significant effort? Well, that's what we've done with Voice Catalyst 2.1. So the world is definitely different today and much, much better if you're a Vocollect user, because today, with Voice Catalyst 2.1, your existing task, your existing workflows can coexist in a very seamless fashion with what we also call voice applications. So if you're doing picking today on a task builder-based task, and you want to add put away as an example, and you were to go to write new code or have new code written with the help of Dematic, it's very possible that new code would be in a voice application, which would be the recommendation. And going forward, both of those things can run on Voice Catalyst 2.1 on the same hardware. So let me go into a little more detail on that and explain how that works. So for starters, everything that is part of the everything that's part of the Talkman A700 Solution are the following features: SoundSense, TouchConnect, RapidStart, which is one that Seth mentioned a moment ago, report problem, battery status, and touch config. All those things are now included whether you run a task or a voice app with Voice Catalyst 2.1. Some of those, however, even give additional benefit. So if you do have things that are built as a voice application, you can do some of these features by triggering them with your voice. So as an example, if you have a Talkman A730 and you have an application where you need to induce the scan on a tote, you can do that by saying scan now. The battery report problem, the report problem or the battery status, similar to the voice triggered scanning, are also done, in fact, with your voice if you have a voice application. So let me go in and explain a little bit more of what each one of these features are and how, in fact, they would benefit you. So first of all, there is the seamless coexistence between the task mode and the voice application mode. So from a worker perspective, everything is pretty much the same for them. When they would initiate their work for the day, the worker would hear their typical list of workflows. They would simply pick the work that they want to do, and the system would load the necessary components. So nothing changes for them. The other benefit for the operation is that there's no need to segregate devices or use separate device profiles for different workflows. So now everything can run on the same device when using Voice Catalyst 2.1. Voice Catalyst 2.1 will also work for those of you who may have already purchased Talkman A500s. So you would have the opportunity to upgrade from the version of software you're on now to Voice Catalyst 2.1 and receive some of the benefits that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So what are some of those immediate benefits? Well, the first one that I wanted to talk about today would be faster shift startup time. And you receive that with TouchConnect. So when you have any of the A700 devices, whether it be the A710, the A720 that I just talked about a moment ago, or the A730 with an integrated scanner, those devices have in them what's called an NFC chip, which is a near-field communication chip. There is a companion chip in our new SRX2 wireless headset. So for a worker to start their shift and to pair and get going, they simply touch the target area of the SRX2, to the target area of the A700 device, and they can reduce their startup process from a matter of minutes to a matter of seconds. So let's talk about that for a moment. There's probably some people on the phone call today that are using a T2 or a T2X with a wired SR series headset. And you know that you have to plug in the headset. The worker then has to find their ID. They then have to scroll through using the device, whether it's on their belt or in their hand. And that whole process of that initial login may take about 2 minutes per worker per shift. So if you're an operation that has 30 workers, this new TouchConnect will save you 90 minutes per day for every day that you use the new solution. So let's talk about another one of the features, which is reducing unwanted noise by an incremental 50%. So we call that feature SoundSense. And what SoundSense does is it further eliminates background noises, whether it be forklifts in the background or freezer fans for those of you who might be operating in a chiller of some sort. Helps eliminate pallet drops, and certainly it eliminates conveyor noise as well. So this is on top of the great noise cancellation that Vocollect already has. SoundSense adds an incremental 50% to that. So what does that mean for a worker? Well, for a worker, it means there's going to be less repeats, which means that worker's likely to be less frustrated. So they're going to have an overall better user experience and hopefully be a lot more efficient worker for you. For you as an operator, what does it mean? Well, it means there's going to be fewer insertions. Also means there's going to be fewer repeats by your workers, which is going to net better productivity for you. Another one of the features is called RapidStart. Seth mentioned this one. It frees supervisors from having to help out with training, because now RapidStart enables the worker to essentially train themselves. So how does that work? Well, RapidStart works with the Talkman A700 device and any browser-enabled device, whether it be an Android device or an iOS device, a smartphone, or a tablet. So they no longer need a Q-term or any other special device that Vocollect may have required in the past. Now they use the software to look at the screen, and it walks the worker through from beginning to end what they need to do to use the Vocollect solution. So once again, no special device needed, faster time to production, whether it's for a new worker or for a seasonal worker. The other benefit that we've seen is it provides very consistent onboarding across every shift. So I know that there's probably no variance across shifts for anybody on this call today, but in some events there are. So using this new RapidStart feature ensures that whether the person's on the first shift or the third shift, they still get a very high quality amount of training. This solution itself saves anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes of supervisor time for each worker trained. So you could apply that number to either your turnover rate or the amount of seasonal employees that you might employ and the time it takes to train them. So once again, a significant opportunity for incremental savings by moving over to this new solution. Next feature I wanted to talk about helps you eliminate wasted travel time. And so we call this feature predictive battery management. So today when there's an operator on the floor and they have Voice Catalyst 2.1 running on a Talkman A700 device, they have an opportunity to find out how much battery life is left in their terminal. But the first thing I want to point out is that in all likelihood, this is going to be a feature that hopefully isn't going to matter a whole lot for them, because our standard batteries on the new A700 solution run for 14 hours. And that includes using them in a chiller as well as running in an ambient environment. We also sell an extended capacity battery which runs up to 24 hours. So we hope that in fact we do eliminate a lot of the need to change batteries mid-shift. But in the event that that does happen, or there might be a need for it, the operator can either use their voice or they can touch a button on the A700 device and ask the system for the battery status, at which point the system will tell them, based on the algorithm worked into the software, how much time remains. So what that should do is it should eliminate any wasted travel time mid-shift and make them as efficient as possible. So what's the value of this feature to you? Well, we estimate that it saves about 5 minutes of travel time per worker per shift. So once again, if you have 30 workers, you can eliminate 2.5 times of travel time per day by going with the A700 solution. Another thing we've built in helps you eliminate worker interruptions. So today everyone is familiar with the fact that there might be a beeping occasionally, their worker reports, or there may be some other issue, and in fact the worker needs to report, effectively a problem. And the way they do that today is the problem occurs. There's some travel time involved where they then go find a supervisor to help describe the problem. The supervisor then has to document it. They might have to turn on logging on the Vocollect system. They have to then capture that data, and then at that point they would probably send that data off to Dematic to analyze what the issue might be, and then Dematic might in fact have to talk to Vocollect if there in fact is a need to escalate whatever that issue is. We've eliminated a lot of those steps with a new feature that we have built in, which is actually called Report Problem. So in that scenario, what happens is the worker either touches the button on the system or actually uses their voice to say Report Problem. And in fact, at that point, everything else I just described is automated. So at that point, voice logging automatically grabs a snapshot, and it starts from the time, it actually starts when the worker obviously says Report Problem, but it triggers something in the system that actually captures memory for a 20 to 30 minute period before they actually said it, because everything's always cached on the terminal. So it will capture from the time they say Report Problem. It'll go forward and capture some additional information. When it's done capturing the information, it's actually packaged up and sent to Voice Console and alerts the supervisor who has access to Voice Console. It highlights it in red and puts it in a format that they can then send it off to Dematic if need be, and then Dematic can then send it off to Vocollect tech support. So this has been actually one of the most widespread successes we've had with new customer adoptions. And what they've told us is that, in fact, if they are able to eliminate one problem a day or use this feature to report one problem a day, it eliminates about 15 minutes of non-productive time for the worker. It also eliminates about 20 minutes of unproductive time for the supervisor or the IT person in charge of that shift having to collect this information, package it up, and analyze it. So once again, a pretty significant step forward with regard to the Vocollect solution. This next feature is probably the one that I get asked for the most whenever I tour sheds or distribution centers in North America, and that is talking to seasoned, veteran Vocollect voice workers who their number one question of me is typically, how do we make this thing go faster? And we've in fact done that. So with this new release of Voice Catalyst 2.1, there's actually an additional 7 speeds, so 7 incremental speeds faster than what happens now today when you use Voice Client and you hit the button and you hear the comment back that this is fastest. So now from the this is fastest point, there's 7 more settings. So the TTS is now 2.5 times faster, so that's the TTS the worker would hear. So if they're picking 100 cases an hour, they can now pick 250 cases an hour. By the way, I'm just kidding. So that's not exactly how it works, but they do in fact hear the TTS 2.5 times faster, which means that they can validate what they've picked that much faster and probably move to the next pick in the assignment that much faster. So there is a lot of benefit in having this new faster TTS speed, and once again, will likely be the most appreciated feature by your workers today who are veteran Vocollect pickers. So thinking about just working more comfortably and more efficiently overall, there's other things that are packaged up in the A700 solution. One is that using that same near-field communication chip that I mentioned earlier, the NFC chip that you use to pair with the SRX2 headset, well, that is also a way to deploy devices faster, and we call that touch config. So you can now load a configuration on a device by just touching the device that's been initially loaded with any other device that you're deploying. So no more serial loads, no more having to dock terminals in order to load information on them. As I've mentioned, the A700 overall is significantly smaller and lighter. So if you're using a T2X today, the new device is actually 60% smaller from a footprint perspective and 40% lighter. I did, in fact, mention the batteries before, but it's worth mentioning again. Now you can actually take a look at them. So these are both A720 devices in the photo. So the photo on the left is the standard battery, which is estimated to run for 14 hours of runtime. The battery on the, or the device on the right, and you can see some of the battery kind of sticking out from the base of the device. That extended battery enables usage for up to 24 hours. The other benefit, or the other feature that we have, is the health of actually the batteries themselves. So today when you deploy a brand new battery into a new A700 device, you have some settings available to you in Voice Console. And you can, there are some default settings in terms of number of months, but you actually have the opportunity to change those defaults. So the battery advice that we've given for a number of years is that in an ambient environment, you can expect a battery to last 12 to 18 months in an operation. And that will probably still hold true. But if you're using a battery in a freezer environment, as an example, you would expect significantly less than that 18-month period. So you can set that for each one of the batteries, and then it will actually tell you, when it's time to replace the battery soon, or the red would be if it's time to replace now. So if you put a limit of 12 months on batteries that you knew were being used in the freezer, you could actually watch it in Voice Console go from green to yellow to red based on how close you are to that 12-month period. So another big part of the overall solution that makes the A700 so desirable is, in fact, the SRX2. And the SRX2 is actually deployed in Q4 of 2012. So this device has now been out for a full year now. And we plan to extend the usefulness of this highly successful product by introducing some new headbands in Q4 of this year. So we are going to be introducing what you see on the right is the SRX30 equivalent, which is going to be a high or a cupped headset or a cupped headband that's rated for high noise. And then we'll also have the device you see on the left, which is the hard hat device, which is also a cupped high noise headset, which can obviously be used in a hard hat setting if that's required. So this will provide quite a few benefits for those of you who have a higher noise environment or feel like that you need some additional noise reduction beyond what the SRX2 offers you today. So in addition to having the new headbands available, the other thing that we just launched is the SRX2 version of software, which is version 3.1.2. So if you are a current SRX2 user, you'll want to talk to Dematic about how to download this software. And if you're on a software support plan, there's no cost for you to get this new software. But it will, in fact, improve the sound quality. It will also provide more detailed debug information if that's needed. And these features will require that you're running Voice Catalyst 2.1 or greater, and of course the SRX2 headset software version 3.1.2 or greater. So I've kind of run through from end to end what the A700 solution components are. Now what I wanted to do was share with you just a little bit of information about some end users who've provided us some firsthand feedback. So with regard to TouchConnect, one of the voice trainers at a current Vocollect account told us that before it was tough for new guys to remember how to load their templates. Now it takes several days before they get it, but now with the SRX2 and the A700, they've only had to show them one time because it's so easy to use the TouchConnect feature. On the SRX2 itself, a voice worker told us that it's much easier to move around without cables, and that they would actually pitch in their own money to buy one if it would help them get it faster. So this is actually from a worker that was in an existing Vocollect facility using an SR20 headset, and they did a pilot of the A700 with the SRX2, and this was the first-hand feedback they provided. From another worker regarding SoundSense, the worker actually said that they mumbled a lot, and they always had to repeat themselves before, but now using the SRX2, they say that it hears them better, and they don't have to repeat themselves anymore. And then finally on TouchConfig, one of the IT people who is responsible for implementing voice at a Vocollect account. So they were able to configure new A700 devices for the whole operation in less than 10 minutes. So once again, no more cable loads, serial cable loads. It's a very fast configuration using TouchConfig. So at the top of the webinar, I said that in addition to going through some of the new features and benefits, I would also walk you through some use cases for the A720 solution. So I'm going to do that now. So there's a couple of different ways you might want to consider the A720. And that's if you, in fact, have an operation that requires frequent scanning. So even though the A730 has the integrated scanner in it, as you know, the Talkman's best when you're able to wear it or mount it on a device as opposed to holding it in your hand. So if you do, in fact, have a need for frequent scanning, you can use that Talkman connector, the TICO connector, to connect up with a scanner like the one shown in the photo. So once again, you'll have a hands-free, eyes-free type of operation for workers who need to scan multiple times at every pick. And it's a much more ergonomic solution, enabling the worker to move freely from pick to pick in fast pick environments. So this is one setup you might want to consider if, in fact, scanning is needed in your operation. Another one might be, and it's obviously a different type of scanning, which would be long-range scanning. So this might still be the need for frequent scanning, but you might, in fact, want to consider using the A720 on a powered truck, a forklift, or a pallet jack itself. But in the case of a forklift where you might be doing put away or replan, you might have already invested in a wired scanner. So rather than not have the ability to use that investment, you can use it on a go-forward basis with the A720 because of the TICO connector. So once again, you'll still have the voice direction, which increases safety for your fork workers, provides an eyes-free and hands-free operation, but you could take advantage of the long-range scanning capability to accurately identify any locations where product has to be stored, whether it's a put or a replan. Having the wireless headset enables the worker to get off the truck, in fact, when they need to do that. There's some occasional scanning work or use cases that I'd like to talk about real quickly as well, and that's with the A730. So another one of the enhancements that has occurred is that with Voice Catalyst 2.1, when you're using the A730, we've actually increased the scan range by about 25% from where it was when the device was initially launched in Q4 of last year. So we've already made some improvements to the software to provide that additional bit of range. And a lot of that range improvement has to do, obviously, with the size of the barcode you're scanning to begin with. But overall, it nets out to be about a 25% improvement in range. So when you think about the different use cases for scanning, whether it's occasional scanning to pick a variable weight as an example versus a long-range scanner, which you might use for put away or replan, I want to go through what those use cases are as well as what the device you might want to consider. So if you're a case pick or a piece pick environment and you have no use for scanning whatsoever, picking an A710 with an SRX2 will save worker startup time, provides a significantly high level of voice recognition, easy to onboard new workers, easy to configure the solution, easy to troubleshoot any problems you might have, and some really great options around longer battery life, whether you select a 14-hour or 24-hour battery life battery. However, as we talked about at the very beginning of the webinar about the fact that people's operations are changing, if not on a daily basis, certainly every 6 months you're having to reevaluate things, and you want to future-proof your operation, you might in fact consider the A730 because you might not have a need for a scanner today, but it may be that 6 months or a year down the road, you will in fact want a scanner. Or you might have part of the operation where you're going to have a change in your operation such that you might have to pick up serial numbers or variable weights or capture lot information. So with the A730, you have the perfect solution to do that. The scanning use cases, once again, if it's a short-range, occasional scanning type of requirement and there are no extra peripherals needed, then the A730 would be the perfect device paired with the SRX2. If you have short-range scanning, but you do frequent scanning, so you're needing to scan pick by pick or you're scanning more often than just voicing things in, then you'll likely want to look at either the A720 with a wired scanner, or you might want to consider the A710, pairing it with a Bluetooth wireless scanner. But once again, you'd probably want a hand-worn, wrist-worn or finger-worn scanner to do that. And once again, to round out that part of the solution, you would want the SRX2. And then finally, as we mentioned, if you're thinking about long-range scanning opportunities where you still need to scan frequently, you could also consider either the A710 with a Bluetooth long-range scanner, or if you've already invested in wired scanners, then you might want to consider the A720 and use the TECO connectors to connect the wired scanner. And like in all the other use cases, we highly recommend the SRX2 over any of the existing wired headsets. And the primary reason for that is the SoundSense technology that you can take advantage of with the SRX2 and the Talkman A700 solution. So with those things in mind and those things to consider, you might be thinking, well, what do I do next based on the solution that I have today? So at a very high level, things to consider is that if you're using a Talkman T2X or a Talkman T5 today with an SRX20 wired headset, and you're running some version of Voice Client 3.x or some version of Voice Console 3.x, what do you need to what do you need to do in order to move on to the A700 solution? Certainly, you'd want to pick the most appropriate A700 device for your operation, whether it be the A710, the A720, or the A730. You'd likely want to consider the SRX2 headset to replace your SR20 headsets. And you might be asking yourself, well, why would I do that? And I think everyone on the call knows that of your Vocollect solution today, probably the #1 point of failure is the wire or the cable on that SRX20 headset. So when you eliminate wires and you eliminate cable, you eliminate a lot of the downtime and the associated costs with replacing that headset. So you've eliminated the need to send it in for repair. You've eliminated the need to replace it. You've eliminated the need to track it and to work on having temporary SRX20s on hand when one of your headsets fails. We see failure rates go down on the hardware, the Talkman itself, as well as on the headsets when people go to wireless solutions. And I'm sure Dematic can give you lots of reference cases within Australia and New Zealand of customers who've already made that transition. So we highly recommend the SRX2 headset, like I said, to do away with wires, but also to take out or take full advantage of the benefit of SoundSense. If you're on Voice Client, you're now going to want to consider moving across to Voice Catalyst 2.1. And like I said before, it doesn't matter what host system you're using or what your application is today. If you're using a Vocollect task today, you can continue to use it tomorrow with Voice Catalyst 2.1 and receive all the benefits that I talked about on this webinar. And then you'll also want to upgrade from Voice Console 3.x that you might be on today. At a minimum, you need to upgrade to Voice Console 5.0 to take advantage of all of these benefits and features we discussed. So that's a very high-level view. So once again, to recap, these are all the things that are part of the A700 solution. They'll help minimize supply chain risks for you, provide you some new opportunities to integrate scanning and voice for any potential or new workflows you might have. I think I've exemplified the ways it will make work easier for both your workers as well as for your staff that supports them. And then finally, you'll have the opportunity, if necessary, to personalize the voice. If you need additional information, want to get some more details, you can certainly reach out to Seth, and he'll put you in connection with the appropriate account manager, or with Martin if you're in New Zealand. So with that, Seth, I am going to end my part of the formal presentation, but I would like to remind everybody that if they have questions at this point, they can actually submit those using the feature on GoToWebinar. And if questions come in, then I will read them so the whole audience can hear them. And then either Seth or myself will be able to hopefully address your question.
Thank you very much for that, Jay. That was excellent. So just as Jay mentioned, please, while we have the time, send any questions through, and we'll do our best to answer those. Also, please don't hesitate to either engage with myself directly, as per the email address on the screen, or reach out to your respective account manager, who will also touch base with you shortly after the webinar to discuss any feedback or any questions that you may have. I think one of the things that, as Jay went through his presentation, that I did also want to mention was with the RapidStart application. One of the things that we see a lot of potential in is the ability to customize that application specifically for a customer's requirements. And what I mean by that is to be able to look at a customer's operation, understand what some of the initial setup and training pain points are, and be able to try and write code or to write code within that application to help train that operator more smoothly in terms of how to address those initial requirements, such as a pre-start checklist or forklift inspection as an example. So if there's any interest or anything on the top of your mind that you can think of that would be helpful in relation to that, please do reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to talk through that process with you and the requirements behind that as well.
So Seth, I'm going to go ahead and begin to read questions. So far we've had about 4 or 5 questions come in. So for those of you who are on the call, feel free to continue to submit them. So I'm going to start with the first question that was asked, which is the A700 required in order to take advantage of Voice Catalyst, or is Voice Catalyst compatible with legacy hardware? So great question, and the answer is Voice Catalyst can be used with the Talkman A500 or with any one of the new A700 devices, the A710, A720, or A730. Voice Catalyst is not compatible with either the T2X or the T5. So now I'll point out one other bit of difference. So if you happen to be a customer who's using the A500, you can use Voice Catalyst for a couple of the different features, which would be you would get the benefit of the SoundSense technology, so that additional or incremental 50% of noise reduction I mentioned. And then a worker can use it to report a problem. So those are the 2 big features. And then you can also get battery status on the A500. But the other features that I mentioned, TouchConnect, TouchConfig, cannot be used. I guess the other feature that's very important that you can use with the A500 is, in fact, the RapidStart worker training. So that is, in fact, available to you using an iOS, or Android-based device. As long as it has a web browser, it in fact can be used with Catalyst with the RapidStart feature. So the next question that came in after that was, how does the system know the user such that they no longer have to scroll through the staff list? So once again, great question. So there's a couple of ways that it knows. In Voice Console, the way it's going to know the user is that if you're using the SRX2, and you assign that to the worker, each one of the SRX2s has a unique code that would be assigned to the worker. So when they pair it to the device, they'll know who that worker is and what work they should be assigned. So that eliminates the need for them to scroll through and look for an assignment. Another question that came in was, let me read through this. It says, if you use the A730, can you only use a wireless headset in the space normally used by the plug? So yeah, the A730, if I understand the question correctly, I think the question is, can you only use a wireless headset with the A730? And the answer to that is yes. The A730 as well as the A710, both of those are Bluetooth-only devices. So there is no way to use any kind of wire or cable to attach any type of peripheral device to either of those 2 devices. The only device in the A700 solution set that you can hook a cable-based device to would be the A720. The A720, however, works both with Bluetooth as well as with using a cable with the Pico connectors. The next question that came in is also a very good one, which is if the devices run for 14 or 24 hours, how long do the headset batteries last? Which is a great question, which I did not cover on the call. But the SRX2 is also rated at higher than the 14-hour range, but not quite to the 24-hour range. We do have quite a few customers who've consistently been reporting anywhere from 16 to nearly 20 hours of battery life with the SRX2. So it will definitely match the entire length of the 14-hour battery, but you may not get the full 24. So another question came in. This one has to do with a customer who's looking for an additional workflow. In this case, it's cycle counting. And they're asking if with Voice Catalyst we have the ability to code the application, or do we need Dematic to do the code for us for those enhancements? So the short answer is going to be you're probably going to want to engage Dematic with that, because Dematic has been fully trained and is fully certified in using the toolkit necessary to do those customizations. However, Voice Catalyst is completely based on an open platform, so there is some training that you could probably get through, or you can get through Vocollect if you wanted to do that on your own. So you do have a couple of options there, and I would recommend that you speak with Dematic about what may be best for you. Question was asked, can I use an A730 with a voice task? And the answer is yes, you can do that. There's currently a voice client available for the A730, but now that the Voice Catalyst 2.1 is able to do both a task as well as an application, I would actually recommend against anyone continuing to use Voice Client. And in fact, the Voice Client that we have released today, which is Voice Client 3.9, is likely the last Voice Client we will release. So all of our innovation on a go-forward basis is going to be built into the Voice Catalyst platform. So we'll continue to support Voice Client, but there won't be any new features attached to Voice Client. So I think that, let me look again, gets me current on the questions that have been asked so far, Seth.
Excellent, Jay. Thank you very much. Well, on that basis, we may conclude the webinar. Thank you again for all of those who have found the time today to attend, particularly at the hour in which we requested for the webinar to begin. So greatly appreciated. Again, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or your current Dematic account manager with any questions that you may have, and we'll ensure that we reach out to you also very soon to discuss the content of the webinar and how we may improve with future ones down the track. Thank you for that, Jay. That was a fantastic presentation. And thank you again to all those who have attended.